6 months from now, you could be standing in the exact same spot, living the same patterns, repeating the same disappointments, or you could be someone you barely recognize. In the best possible way. That choice, whether you stay trapped or break free, doesn't depend on luck, money, or the people around you. It depends on whether you're willing to face the one thing most of us spend a lifetime avoiding, your unconscious. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people believe they can change their lives by rearranging external circumstances. They leave one job for another, hoping the new office will finally feel different. They walk away from one relationship only to stumble into another with the same heartbreak. They move across cities, across countries even, thinking distance will create freedom. But what follows them, what never lets go, is the set of invisible patterns inside, the unresolved fears, suppressed desires, and unclaimed strengths buried in the unconscious. Carl Jung saw this over and over again. Patients would come to him exhausted, telling stories of endless reinvention that led nowhere. And he realized the common denominator was not their jobs, not their partners, not their geography. It was themselves. The unconscious was dragging them back into the same storylines until they learned to confront it directly. This is why Jung's insight was revolutionary. He discovered that real transformation doesn't take decades of grinding effort. It doesn't require you to pile on new habits, force yourself into a stricter schedule, or recite endless affirmations in the mirror. Real change happens when you reach specific psychological thresholds, moments where the unconscious stops being your enemy and starts becoming your ally. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming your true self. And here's the part that will surprise you. Individuation doesn't have to take a lifetime. It doesn't even need years. Jung found that when people committed to facing their unconscious, the psyche could reorganize itself in leaps, quantum shifts that happen in months, not decades. Think about it this way. The unconscious is like a powerful ocean current beneath the surface of your life. Most people try to fight it, swimming against it, exhausting themselves, never getting anywhere. But the moment you learn to align with that current, it doesn't just carry you forward, it accelerates you into a completely new direction. That's what the next 6 months can offer. A structured, step-by-step process drawn from Jung's most powerful techniques, designed to map your shadow, integrate your rejected parts, and finally give birth to the self you were always meant to be. This isn't self-help. It isn't positive thinking. It's not about becoming a better version of who you are now. It's about becoming someone fundamentally different, someone more whole, more authentic, more alive. The patterns that once trapped you can dissolve. The triggers that once controlled you can become teachers. The very struggles you thought were curses can transform into messages that guide you toward freedom. So ask yourself, 6 months from today, do you want to look back and see the same walls, the same mistakes, the same tired storylines? Or do you want to look back and realize that you stepped into a process of transformation so deep, so irreversible, that you can't even remember what it felt like to live as your old self? That's the journey of individuation. And it begins the moment you decide to face your unconscious. Not with fear, but with curiosity. 1. Jung's core insight. The hidden force controlling 95% of your life. We like to believe we're steering the wheel of our own lives. We make choices every day: what job to take, who to love, where to live, and we think these conscious decisions define our destiny. But Carl Jung uncovered a truth that turns this idea upside down. Nearly 95% of your life is run by the unconscious. That means most of what you call choices are actually patterns, deeply buried programs you don't even realize are running the show. Think about it. You leave a toxic workplace, but somehow, the same office politics appear in the next company. You end a painful relationship, only to attract a partner with the exact same destructive traits. You move across the country hoping for a fresh start, but within months, the same problems creep back in. These repetitions aren't punishments. They're not bad luck either. Jung insisted, they are messages from your unconscious. Like warning lights on the dashboard of a car. They're flashing to get your attention. Each pattern is saying, look here. Something inside you is unresolved. And here's where it gets fascinating. The unconscious isn't trying to sabotage you, it's trying to transform you. It keeps staging the same drama, again and again, until you finally see the role you're playing. History is filled with examples of powerful figures caught in this loop. Take Richard Nixon. He won one of the biggest landslides in American political history. Yet his unconscious obsession with enemies and betrayal led to Watergate and his downfall. No matter how much external success he built, the unresolved inner narrative tore it down. Or look at Princess Diana. To the world she was adored, glamorous, compassionate, a global icon, yet her repeated struggles and love, her battles with self-worth, showed how powerful unconscious patterns can shape even the most celebrated lives. Even Barack Obama, stepping into the presidency, faced not just political battles but the inner tension between his deep desire for unity and the raw reality of division. Power doesn't silence the unconscious. It amplifies it. Jung's insight was revolutionary. Changing your outer life without changing your inner life is like moving furniture around in a burning house. The fire, the unconscious, will recreate the same chaos until you deal with it directly. True transformation begins when you shift your relationship with your unconscious from opposition to collaboration. Instead of fighting your repeating struggles, you ask, what is this pattern trying to teach me? That's the pivot point. The moment you stop seeing your unconscious as the enemy and start treating it as an ally, the whole direction of your life changes. Because the unconscious doesn't want you stuck, it wants you whole. 1 months 1 to 2. Mapping the shadow. Jung taught that before you can change anything in your life, you first have to see what's been driving you in the dark. The first 2 months are about one task only: mapping your shadow. The shadow isn't your bad side. It's every part of you that you pushed away to be accepted: your anger, your ambition, your sensitivity, even your brilliance. And because you buried them, they now control you from behind the scenes. Exercise 1. Track your triggers. Every time someone irritates you, write it down. That coworker whose arrogance makes your blood boil. That arrogance might be pointing to your own rejected confidence. The needy friend you can't stand? That could be your own suppressed vulnerability. Triggers aren't random annoyances, they are GPS signals from your unconscious. Look at someone like Steve Jobs. His legendary outbursts of anger weren't just flaws, they revealed the fierce drive for excellence he had long suppressed under a peaceful California kid image. Once he integrated that intensity, it became the very force that built Apple. Exercise 2. Watch your projections. Notice when you're absolutely certain someone else is the problem. The stronger your conviction, the more likely you're projecting your own rejected material onto them. Jung said we don't see people as they are. We see them as screens for our unconscious. Take Richard Nixon again. Obsessed with enemies, betrayal, and conspiracies, he projected his own inner fear of weakness onto the world, until it consumed his presidency. The projection became his reality. Exercise 3. Examine your admiration. The shadow isn't only dark. It also holds your golden qualities, the talents you admire in others but can't yet claim in yourself. When you put someone on a pedestal, you're often looking at your own potential reflected back at you. Think of Nelson Mandela. People admired his patience and forgiveness after 27 years in prison. But that golden shadow wasn't superhuman. It was a quality every human being can grow into. The fact that we admire it so deeply shows it already lives, at least in seed form, inside us. The result: by the end of 2 months, if you've tracked your triggers, your projections, and your admiration, you'll hold a personal map of your unconscious. You'll see, maybe for the first time, the real cast of characters running your inner life. That map alone begins to change everything, because what you can finally see, you can begin to transform. 2 months 3 to 4. Integration. Once you've mapped your shadow, the next step is to bring those rejected parts back into the light. Jung's method here was groundbreaking. Instead of suppressing your shadow or trying to eliminate it, you dialogue with it. The tool: active imagination. You sit quietly, close your eyes, and allow the rejected part of you, anger, ambition, sensitivity, to take form in your imagination. Maybe it shows up as a warrior, a child, or even a storm. Then you ask 3 simple but powerful questions. 1. Why are you in my life? 2. What do you want me to know? 3. What gift are you trying to give me? When you ask with sincerity, these parts don't attack you. They answer. They reveal why they were exiled and what energy they hold for you. Look at Winston Churchill. His lifelong struggle with what he called the black dog of depression could have destroyed him. But instead of denying it, He leaned into it, using the depth of his melancholy to fuel his wartime speeches. The very shadow that haunted him also gave him unmatched gravitas and resilience. Practice in month 4. Integration doesn't stay in imagination. You bring it into daily life through small, controlled actions. If you've rejected anger, practice setting a clear boundary. If you've buried ambition, take one deliberate step toward a personal goal. If you've suppressed sensitivity, allow yourself one moment of honest vulnerability each day. Think about Oprah Winfrey. Her early life was filled with trauma and rejection. She could have hardened completely. Instead, she integrated her vulnerability into her public persona, sharing pain openly. That act of controlled openness didn't weaken her. It made her one of the most influential voices in the world. The result? By the end of month 4, the parts of yourself that once sabotaged you begin working for you. The anger that made you explosive becomes the power to set limits. The selfishness you hated transforms into healthy self-preservation. The sensitivity you buried becomes your capacity for empathy. Integration doesn't turn you into someone else. It gives you back the energy you lost by exiling parts of yourself. And when that energy returns, you start to feel like a different person, more whole, more alive, more authentically yourself. 3 months 5 to 6. The transcendent function and birth of the self. By month 5, the real test begins. You've mapped your shadow. You've started integrating it, but now the tension between your old identity and your emerging self becomes unbearable. Jung called this moment the activation of the transcendent function. Month 5. Holding the tension. You're caught between two worlds. The old self still pulls at you with familiar patterns, while the new self whispers of possibilities you've never lived before. Most people rush to resolve this tension. They either fall back into old habits or try to force a premature breakthrough. But Jung insisted, don't choose. Hold both. It's like being pregnant with yourself, carrying the discomfort of transformation without knowing exactly what's being born. Think about Abraham Lincoln in the middle of the Civil War. He was torn between his cautious, pragmatic self and the emerging vision of emancipation that history demanded of him. For months, he lived in that unbearable tension, refusing to retreat but not rushing forward until the moment was ripe. That capacity to hold opposites is what allowed him to transform both himself and his nation. Month 6. The birth of the self. If you can withstand that tension without collapsing, something remarkable happens. The old ego, the identity shaped by society's expectations, by family conditioning, by trauma, begins to dissolve. What emerges is not a better version of your old self, but a fundamentally new organizing center, the self. At this stage, decisions no longer come from fear of rejection or hunger for approval. They come from a deeper alignment. You're no longer chasing success to prove your worth, or relationships to patch your wounds. You act from the center of who you truly are. Think of Nelson Mandela walking out of prison after 27 years. He could have emerged bitter, clinging to the old narrative of vengeance. Instead, he came out centered, free from the false self that had been shaped by pain. He embodied the self, a leader who united rather than divided, who transformed personal suffering into collective healing. The outcome? By the end of 6 months, you are no longer living as a puppet of unconscious patterns. The old self that was ruled by fear, trauma, and social expectation has dissolved. What takes its place is the self, authentic, unshakable, rooted in wholeness. This isn't self-improvement, it's rebirth. 2 practices that run through all 6 months. Dream journal. Jung believed dreams are not random noise but direct messages from the unconscious. Keeping a dream journal means writing down every dream you remember the moment you wake up, no matter how small or strange. Over time, patterns emerge. In the early stages, you might dream of being chased, your shadow demanding attention. Later, you may dream of confrontations, of death and rebirth, or finally, of arriving somewhere new. These motifs track your psychological journey almost like mile markers on a highway. Look at Martin Luther King Jr. His famous, "I have a dream," wasn't just rhetoric, it came from the depth of a visionary imagination. The unconscious speaks in images, and those images can reshape entire nations when someone takes them seriously. Your personal dreams may not spark a civil rights movement, but they can guide your transformation if you pay attention to the symbols. Synchronicity journal. Alongside dreams, Jung urged his patients to record synchronicities, those impossible coincidences that feel too meaningful to ignore. The book that falls open to the exact passage you need. The person who shows up with the answer to a question you've been wrestling with. The opportunity that appears just as you're ready. To Jung, synchronicities weren't accidents. They were signs that the unconscious and the external world were beginning to move in harmony. Think about Mahatma Gandhi. At critical points in his struggle, unlikely events and timely encounters shifted the course of history, moments that seemed orchestrated. As if the universe itself responded to his inner clarity. That's synchronicity on a global stage. On a personal level, these events remind you that your transformation isn't happening in isolation. The effect. By keeping both journals, you're building a bridge between the conscious and unconscious. Dreams show you the inner transformation. Synchronicities reveal how the outer world reshapes itself in response. Together, they keep you aligned with the process. Especially when the ego wants to pull you back into old patterns. The point of no return. Around month 4, most people hit a breaking point. Relationships that used to feel stable begin to collapse. Jobs that once made sense suddenly feel unbearable. Old habits that gave you comfort stop working altogether. It feels like your life is falling apart, but Jung warned. This isn't failure. It's the signal that you're entering what he called the night sea journey. The night sea journey is the psychological plunge into darkness. The necessary death of the old identity before the birth of the new self. It's terrifying because the ego senses it's losing control. But just like the night sky before dawn, the collapse is what makes transformation possible. Look at Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Great Depression. His old political identity, shaped by privilege and tradition, couldn't survive the collapse of the economy. He had to reinvent himself, bringing bold reforms like the New Deal. That journey through the night reshaped not only his leadership but the entire American system. Or consider Nelson Mandela again. His 27 years in prison were the darkest stretch of his life, a literal night sea journey. Yet by enduring that darkness without giving in to bitterness, he emerged as someone new, no longer defined by anger but by reconciliation. His personal transformation became the foundation of South Africa's rebirth. Jung stressed that once you pass this threshold, the process is irreversible. You can't go back to the old self even if you try. People who cross this line often describe it the same way. I can't remember how to be who I used to be. The clothes of the old identity simply don't fit anymore. This is the point of no return. The collapse is not the end, it's the beginning of the self. You've now seen the 3 stages of Jung's 6-month journey. First, months 1 and 2. Mapping the shadow. The discipline of seeing the parts of yourself you've rejected. Then months 3 and 4. Dialogue and integration. Learning to talk with those hidden parts and reclaim their energy. And finally, months 5 and 6. The birth of the self. When the old ego begins to dissolve and your true center comes alive. This isn't about tweaking your habits or polishing your resume. This isn't self-improvement, it's self-transformation, a complete shift in how you experience life from the inside out. Remember this. The next 6 months are going to pass whether you engage in this process or not. The only question is, will you still be living the same patterns? Or will you have allowed your old self to die so the person you were always meant to be can finally be born? If this speaks to you, subscribe to Dharma Veins so you don't miss what's coming next. In the following video, we'll dive into active imagination, Jung's most powerful technique for speaking directly with your unconscious. That's where the real dialogue begins. And now I want to hear from you. Which of these 3 stages feels the most challenging for you? Mapping your shadow, integrating it, or holding the tension until the self emerges? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflections might be exactly what another viewer needs to read today.